logistically, familially, coordinating. Still don't feel like I've had a chance to grieve. I'm not sure if I ever will amply. But bear with me, I'm going to do my best, which is all I can do. The last time I stood here was 8 years ago when my dad unexpectedly passed away. At that time, that was the event that had rocked me the most of any event in my life. And there was really one thing that made it easier, and that was the fact that my mom was sitting right there. My mom and I got through that together. So needless to say, doing this one largely by myself, but with abundant love, care, and support from the same community that I thanked 8 years ago, has meant a lot. There are faces in this room who were in the emergency room with her when she took her last breath, and I was 3,000 miles away, at no fault of my own, of course, but watching through FaceTime while scheduling flights to come back as soon as I could. There isn't too much you can do when you're 3,000 miles away, but I did my best, which is all my mom would have wanted. And there are faces in this room that were not only in that room with her as well, but members of this community who have always been an integral part of our lives. I said it 8 years ago when it pertained to my dad. And unfortunately, deep down, when I stood here 8 years ago saying about my dad, unfortunately, deep down, I knew, a little part of me knew, and a little part of me hoped that I would never have to. But a part of me knew that one day I'd probably stand here and have to say something about my beloved mother. I just didn't know that it would be 8 years later. I thought maybe we would have longer. I hoped we would have longer. So, to conclude my introduction, thank you for being here. Thank you for the love, support, and care that you showed my mother, and she clearly showed you as well, which is why it's important that you're here. Marjorie Fox, aka Mom, aka Grammy, she liked to sign her cards MMG, Marjorie, Mom, Grammy. MMG, it's hard for me to say anything in the past tense yet. I haven't gotten used to that, so bear with me. But Marjorie Fox, my mother, is the strongest person I have ever known. I kind of joked when my dad passed that I don't think he would have any trepidations hearing me say, I think my mom is stronger than my dad. I think he'd agree. And now they're together and hopefully nodding. My mom is the strongest person I've ever known. It behooves me to say she's the kindest, most generous, most caring, most sincerely loving of others person I have ever known. I often quipped that if everyone were like my mom, the world would be perfect. That does not mean that she was perfect. Nobody is perfect. But if everyone was like my mom, and if everybody cared about others more than themselves, as my mother did, then the world would be pretty darn close to perfect, in my opinion. Being an only child, sometimes there are pluses and sometimes there are minuses, as there are with just about everything in life, pros and cons. I learned a lot of that through the analyses of financial advising through my mom, and my wife loves to remind me of the pros and cons and pluses and minuses when it comes to spreadsheets and lists as an accountant. I'm trying to say whatever I can to be a little bit funny because I'm trying very hard to find anything to smile about these days, but being an only child has its pros and cons. When you lose someone like this, there are a lot of cons to be having to handle it yourself. It behooves me to say one more time that I don't think I could have handled this if it weren't for the love and support of many people in this room. A few memories that come to mind to elaborate on our relationship. One of my favorite things to do as a kid was to just sit with my mom on either a rocking chair on the porch or a swinging bench and watch the storms come in. Watch the rain pour down over trees and the trees blowing in the wind. And amid the storm, she would sing You are my sunshine, my sunshine. And you probably know the rest of that song. And she would always tell me that no matter what the storm is, you can always find the sunshine. And when she was going through hard times, she said that Dad and I were her sunshine. She still was saying that in later years, just affected me differently when I was a kid. She valued education so much, having an extensive education herself, that before I was big enough to walk to the bus stop myself, she would give me a ride to the bus stop on her way to Hopewell Rembert Advisors or Rembert Marjorie Laws Fox or whatever it was at that time. And she'd give me a ride to the bus stop, and the last thing most kids want to hear on the way to a bus stop ride, when they got literally about 30 seconds to think about what they have for the day, and usually I might be finishing up homework on the bus ride or something like that, but she would have the word of the day. Word of the day, but about 30 seconds for her to give me a vocabulary word. And she was very competitive, as most people in here, if not everyone knows. She wanted me to learn a new word every day. And so she would give me the word, give me the definition, but then most importantly to her, I would have to use it in context. She said that I would only prove I knew it if I could use it in context. So it ameliorated my vocabulary immensely. One time I was in a meeting and I used the words mendacious and sagacious in the same sentence, and I was accused of speaking Latin. But it was thanks to my mom's dear love of education and continued education, which she herself did and helped many others do, that I learned those words of the day, and they've helped me immensely in subsequent years, especially when the SATs came around. My mom was also so strong physically, in addition to mentally and emotionally, that despite being a football player and a lacrosse player and athlete of other sports, I could not beat my mom in an arm wrestling match until I was 16 years old, playing high school football and lacrosse and lifting weights every day. So being able to beat my mom in an arm wrestling match as a pretty big young man at that age was quite an accomplishment, because her physical strength was only matched by her spiritual, emotional, and mental strength as well. One time, and I won't get into too many details, but yes, she did worry about me. I grew up kind of in the woods and played on lakes and construction sites and trees and climbed lots of things. One time I got hurt, let's just say. And we had been throwing rocks at each other across a big pit meant to be a foundation for a new home at a construction site. And I got hit badly in the head with a rock, and let's just say I was bleeding profusely. And I showed back up in the house. She was on one of those old-fashioned things connected to the wall with a long twirling cord. And I just came in and I said, "Mom, something's wrong." And needless to say, there was enough red around that something was really wrong. And without hesitating, of course, she did all the medically necessary things and got some towels and loaded me into the back of the car. We're on our way to the hospital, and I was probably only 8 or 9 at the time. I was pretty young still. And it was really the first remembrance I have of talking about God, other than going to church here with her for so many years, but the first remembrance I have of her when we talked about God. And I was literally holding a towel in the back seat, laying down, that was now went from white to red. And I asked my mom, pretty coherently, I think, of the circumstances, I said, "Mom, why does God let bad things happen to good people?" My mom thought about it for a few seconds. I remember vividly. And she said, looking at me in the rearview mirror on the way to the hospital, "Son, we're not puppets. We're not puppets. God tries to lead us in the right direction and give us the tools that we need. But he doesn't make us do certain things. He doesn't make things happen. Ultimately, it's up to us." I didn't really understand that too much as an 8 to 9-year-old bleeding out. But I remember it vividly, and needless to say, I've thought a lot about why something like what happened on July 29th would happen. Thought a lot about it, and it's made me think more about that moment that happened 30-some years ago. I'll only say one thing, because it's already been spoken about, and you can read about it in the countless magazine articles she was quoted in, and everyone knows how successful and hardworking and driven she was in her financial industry and profession. I'll only mention one thing about that. kind of a personal note that I got to see behind the scenes, because I actually worked for her when she was at Marjorie Laws Fox. I got to work with her and Dan and John and the rest of the team at Marjorie Laws Fox. And I learned a lot about not only financial advising, that side of it, but I learned a lot more about her, seeing her in the professional realm. And my mom, at a time when a lot of people either wouldn't take certain clients because they didn't have enough money, AUM, assets under management, something like that, you had to have a certain amount in order to be taken as a client. My mom made it such a priority of hers to always make sure that she actually had a grading system, not of financial assets or anything like that, but in terms of integrity and qualities in a person that she wanted to work with. And I will never forget one instance in which a woman who had been turned away from some financial firms and was not going to be a client because she just didn't have enough money for these other firms to work with. My mom just said, "She's a good lady. I'm going to work with her because she gets an A+ on my scale of character." And so she would work with anybody. She'd much rather work with someone who was simply a good person who could become family and friend than just someone with numbers on a piece of paper. When I got back in a very haphazard fashion on July 29th, when this happened, to her house without her in it, there was a little star, a little cut out yellow star in her handwriting, which was distinct. If you've ever seen her handwriting, it's very, very distinct. It says courage. And I'm not sure exactly why that little star was on the top of her dresser saying courage. I hadn't seen it before, but it was there. And one of the things my mom always said that her father, my grandpa, Fred, would always talk about is, and he was a major, for the record, he worked his way up from a second lieutenant to a major in World War II in the Marines, so he saw some tough times. But he said when tough times, she would tell me, because I never got to meet him, that when tough times happen, you either keep going or you give up. And she would say, "We don't give up." So in all the trials and tribulations that she had to face, she never gave up. And she taught me, and at times I think even taught and inspired my dad, who was a very tough man himself. She taught us not to give up. John alluded to a frivolous, baseless lawsuit that they had to endure. And I will never forget the nights where she was just sitting over the computer trying to do the best she could for her clients during that process, not even thinking about herself. And the most I could do was give her a back rub as she's sitting at that computer. And she loved those neck and back rubs, and that was me doing the best I could for her under very difficult situations. A lot of the decisions I've had to make in the last 3 weeks have either come down to what I know is right to do myself, or if I don't, and I'm at a crossroads, I think, what would my mom want me to do? What would Marjorie Laws Fox want me to do? As you can probably tell, I didn't prepare anything written. I tried to a few times, but I was picking up some family at the airport and trying to handle a whole bunch of logistical matters on my mother's behalf. It's been quite a whirlwind, to say the least. So, in trying to think about kind of the theme of what I will pretty much here eventually conclude with, what would my mom want me to do? What would Marjorie Fox, someone who's touched everyone in this room in one way or another, and I would venture to say me most of all as her son, what would she want me to do? Part of me wants to be angry. Why did this happen? Part of me wants to just break down and cry and be sad, which would be completely understandable. But what I think Marjorie Fox, my beautiful mother, aka Grammy, would want me to do is be thankful. So I'm going to be thankful. Even though I wanted 10, 20 more years of times with her, I'm going to be thankful that we got 77. Even though the world needs more people like her, I'm going to be thankful that she was here. I'm going to be thankful that for some reason God chose me to be her son. As much as I wanted so many more road trips because we loved road trips together, I'm going to be thankful that we just did one in March. as Gigi alluded to, Genevieve, we call her Gigi, but as Gigi alluded to, it was a bit of a family reunion in certain wonderful ways and certain stressful ways, but I'm glad we did it. And it was almost as if it was a fire inside my mother that had to be put out in good ways, a fire of passion that had to be addressed, and she did it. I'll never forget, I said to my mom, Mom, this is going to be complicated. Do you really want to do it? Because if you say we're going to do it, I'll do it. I'll help you with Gigi's help, of course. We'll do this. Are you sure you want to do this? And she said, yes. 100%, I have to do this. I said, okay, we're doing it. And we did it. We had a great trip in March, one of our many road trips. Kara alluded to a number of road trips as well. She loved road trips just like her mother, my Nana, did. So instead of wishing how many more we could have had, I'll be so thankful we had one in March. Instead of being really upset that we're not going to have more times to walk down the pier with Kara and Savvy, I'm going to be so thankful we just did in July. Just 2 weeks prior to what happened, we were walking down the pier in Huntington Beach. A photo of is on the back of the bulletin, which my mom would love that. She loved that photo. I was the pier that we walked on one last time, not knowing it, on July 9th. So, I am going to be thankful that our lives were blessed. Mine probably most of all, and many right here in a few of these front rows, very intimately as well, and everyone in this room clearly in one way or another. I'm going to be so thankful that we got to have her. As much as I wish we got to have her more. As I dropped her off at the airport on July 9th, a mere 20 days before her stroke and car accident, I kid you not, I gave her an extra hug. For the record, I hate going to LAX. LAX is my least favorite part of the earth. But I would always go, whether it took an hour or 3 hours at times, I would always go and pick her up and take her back. This past July 9th, I was dropping my mother off at LAX for what I did not know at the time was the last time. Gave a hug. I said, I love you. I swear to God, as she started walking away, for some reason, I said to myself, one more hug. And I walked over, called her back, and she was already in business mode. She's already got her stuff, and she's going in there and pre-check, and got to make sure she had her ticket and all that. But I called her back for a second, and I was rushing over to her with the car parked, and police and everyone, all the craziness that is LAX airport. And I said, we need one more hug. And she hated it when I said this, because I had said it relatively often when I dropped her off, but I said, you never know how many more we have left. And she hated that. She's like, no, I don't. She went a little punch on the arm and say, don't say that. Well, I'm glad I said it, because I said I want one more hug. We gave each other a real tight hug. I just said, I love you, Mom. She goes, I love you, my son. And then she went off to the terminal. And I never knew, or didn't know at the time, that it was going to be the last time I saw her. I am glad that, as some of you may know, her closest friends, and Pastor knows, she and I spoke more often in the last couple of years than we had in previous years. We made it a point to talk on the phone when we couldn't be with each other in person, which is hard enough to do when you live across the country. We spoke more in person than we had for a long time. Over the phone when not in person. We spoke about philosophy, things that were going on in our daily lives, religion, spirituality, politics, economics, the markets, life, and philosophy. And I'm really glad that I asked her one time in the last year or so, what is the purpose of life? Because in the last 3 weeks, I've been asking myself that a lot. What is the purpose of life?
My mom's answer to that question without hesitation, and I have to think that it dates back perhaps to her camping, hiking, and survival skills learning that she did with my grandpa Fred, the Marine Corps officer. Because it's similar to, say, a Boy Scout mindset that I learned as a young man. We used to say, you always leave a place cleaner than you found it. If you're camping, you leave a place cleaner than you found it. You leave it better than you found it. Well, when I asked her just within the last year, Mom, what do you think the purpose of life is? She said, to leave this world a better place because you lived in it. It's pretty good. Leave this world a better place because you lived in it. I'm trying my best, and I'm sure many of you in this room, if not everybody, are trying to do that on a daily basis. And I am here to say, hoping and praying that she's listening, that Mom, you left this world a better place. This place we call Earth, which is nowhere near compared to where you are now, you left it a better place. This place and the people in it, including those in this room, are better. Most importantly, me, Kara, Brooke, Savvy, her dearest friends and family. But this world is a better place because of Marjorie Laws Fox. And I have 100 million trillion% confidence in saying that. Very last thing I'll say is to give you all a piece of advice that I gave myself, and I'm so glad I took my own advice that day dropping her off at the airport. In Marjorie Laws Fox's honor, give that extra hug. Tell your loved ones one more time, even if they get sick of hearing it, I love you. Tell your loved ones, even when you're frustrated with them, which my mom and I occasionally got frustrated with. Tiny, minuscule, infinitesimal, which was one of the words of the day when I was a kid. Give that extra hug. Squeeze a little tighter. Tell them you love them. Make the world a better place, one person at a time. Just like Mom did. This will be brief. You will all see what I hope you would think is a beautiful display in the meeting hall that I worked very hard on to put together. My mom, despite all her accomplishments, was so modest, she really was, that I only found 2 framed pictures of her in looking through pictures and boxes and frames. She had so many pictures of her friends and her family and us framed, but so few of herself. So I worked very hard on that over there. The display that hopefully you'll all see. While I was looking through things, I found a letter from my dad to my mom, and it's on IBM stationery. It's on IBM stationery, handwritten in my dad's cursive. On IBM stationery, and I worked with Uncle Richard. My Uncle Richard is quite a good historian, and we tried to kind of figure out maybe what the date was since it's not dated. Best we could come up with is early 70s, maybe 1970, 1971. I never had seen this letter. My mom never talked about it, but she saved it and kept it close, clearly for decades, with some of her most prized personal belongings. And I felt like when I read it, not only was it important to me, but I felt like, you know what, maybe it's a way to keep my dad, whom I was speaking about 8 years ago from this same podium, maybe it's a way to have him involved in this service as well. It reads from, again, roughly 1970. Dear Margie, I am sitting at my desk waiting for the taxi to go to the aeropuerto. It will be fun in Puerto Vallarta, but not as much fun as it would be if you were going with me. You have every reason to be confident of yourself and your abilities. At work and away from work, You have earned the respect of all with whom you associate. Naturally, there are times when we question our progress, ability, and motivation. I often do. I don't think that any of us will ever avoid those occasional down feelings, but always remember, I am very proud of you. Love, David. P.S. Have a nice Thanksgiving and a pleasant stay in Sacramento and Santa Rosa. I will see you on Monday. I don't know if anybody else recalls, but the day she passed was July 29th, a Monday. So, Mom and Dad, I hope you are together, holding each other in the tight and protective arms that you lived with each other and taught me to do with my loved ones. And Mom, I will see you again. I will see you in everything beautiful in this world. It's less beautiful now that you're not here, but there are still beautiful things, and I will see you in everything beautiful. I will see you in the blowing of the trees. I will see you in the raindrops as they hit water. I will see you in things like the double rainbow that I saw last week, that some of you may have seen or heard about after a storm just last week. I will see you in the flowers. I will see you in your granddaughters' faces. I will see you in the faces of all those that you touched and whom you loved and who love you. Most importantly, you will live on forever in the ways that you touched me and the rest of us with the values of hard work, courage, perseverance, kindness, and truly epitomizing the golden rule. For my mother didn't just treat others the way she wanted to be treated, as those of you who worked with her in financial advising and saw the pioneering and the trailblazing that she did. She treated others better than she wanted to be treated. We should all live in such a way. I love you with all of my heart, MMG. Our lives will never be the same without you, but we will do you justice by carrying on the legacies that you taught us and you taught especially me. As Abraham Lincoln said, all that I am or ever hope to be, I owe to my darling angel of a mother.